Jody McDonald, your Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. After just the second loss of the season, beaten by the Cowboys on Saturday, Christmas Eve, before a Christmas off. And we were off yesterday. Glad to be back with you here on Birds 365. And yeah, if you guys are not happy with the fact that I pointed out that the backup quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, hold on, let me correct myself. The third string quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers is well outplaying the backup quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles. Here, let me make you feel better, Eagle fans. Here's a backup quarterback that Gardner Minshew is much better than. How about that St. Nick Falls last night?
Oof. Oof.
Oof.
Oof.
Not good for the Super
almost
Bowl hero
like,
of 2000.
yeah. Now, I will say, look, Brock's playing great. There's surprising to me,
And by the way, the last week and a half at least, without Deebo Samuel, he's down one of his biggest weapons. Samuel got hurt 2 weeks ago, and he's still putting up those unbelievable numbers.
Yeah, and you know me, I'm a big Kyle Shanahan fan, so it's nice to have him scheming it up. But Shane and Nick are pretty good as well here. I would still say Kyle's the best. But, he didn't do that with Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance in the little time that he played. So you got to give Brock Purdy a lot of credit. The only thing I'll say about passer rating, and I've said this before, the whole thing, I don't like it for this reason. Completely skewed by interceptions. So if you have interceptions, you have a bad passer rating. Now, a lot of times, and we have debated, we can debate, whose fault, who's got more culpability. They both have some culpability, but who's more, who's less. The point is it skews the whole formula. So, there are times where it's not a quarterback's fault completely. I mean, obvious that it's not the quarterback's fault, but he's the one who pays when it comes to statistics and passer rating, which is why I'm not a big fan of that particular statistic, because interceptions skew it way too much. And, by the way, the other end of the spectrum, if you don't throw a lot of interceptions, sometimes, not in the case of Jalen Hurts this year, not in the case of Aaron Rodgers over pretty much the majority of his career, but sometimes with other quarterbacks, it means you're not taking chances. You're not throwing the football down the field. You're not pressing the defense. So I wouldn't just point to that number and say, boom. I think Gardner Minshew, my overriding point, has nothing to do with Brock Purdy. Gardner Minshew played well for a backup quarterback and proved again that he's one of the best 32 quarterbacks in the world.
Yeah, we'll disagree on that. Quarterback rating, other than, I agree with you, it is an imperfect science, imperfect way to rate quarterbacks. Which stat would you use?
Well, there's ESPN's is better.
You trust anything ESPN puts out analytically?
Well, I assume you're talking about the Football Power Index, but
yeah.
Yes. I mean, Tony Khan's got his company, True Media. You got Pro Football Focus. There's a bunch better. You got Football Outsiders. You got their DBOA. You got Warren Sharp analyst, who's been a consultant to the Eagles in the past. There's a bunch better, to be honest. Yeah, it's not a good
but
stat.
A lot of those, including Pro Football Focus and Football Outsiders, and we have guys on from both of those two outlets. Some of it's subjective. I'm talking about just a hard and cold number, not a subjective analysis.
Well, I'd rather have subjective, and from football people. And again, it depends on who you trust. Like I always say with film work, who do you trust? Follow Brian Balding or whoever of the film people. When guys know what they're watching, know what they're doing, I'd rather have them than just look at a number and doesn't tell me. I'll go back to Rager again, who stops running. Well, that's not the quarterback's fault. That is flat out not the quarterback's fault but it's on the passer rating. So there's a black and white example, as opposed to the, we can talk about 50-50, 80-20, 70-30, whose culpability. There's in the Minshew case, there's culpability on both sides. But there are times when it's flat out not the quarterback's fault. And it's not shown. And that's where I'd rather have somebody like Baldy looking at the film saying, okay, this is not the quarterback's fault. We're not going to grade him down for that, so to speak. That's my only point.
My biggest problem with quarterback rating is that it's not even passer rating is it doesn't factor in what a guy gives you with his ability to make play with his legs. When you're rating an overall performance of a quarterback, if that is part of his game, that should go into your analysis. And it doesn't in that particular stat. That is purely about how you pass the football. But I give you a chance, Johnny Mac. And if you can't get it today during the show, I'll ask you to do so for tomorrow's show. Give me one quarterback rating that has Gardner Minshew's performance against the Cowboys this past week better than the worst of the 3 games that Brock Purdy has started. Take whichever one ranks the worst, comes out the worst, rated the worst, subjectively judged to be the worst, and give me one outlet that rates that performance below what Gardner Minshew did.
Well, I could do it right off the bat. Pro Football Focus gave him a 72 overall number. Brock Purdy is 71.8 as a total, as a quarterback, as an NFL.
They give Minshew 72 on his performance on
72.
Really?
Yeah, he played well. He played well. And
for
a backup quarterback.
Well, they're both backup. Well, actually, excuse me, Purdy's a third string quarterback. So we're comparing apples to apples. We're not comparing him to another starter. We're comparing him to another backup quarterback.
If you're asking me who's a better quarterback, Gardner Minshew or Brock Purdy, I'm going to say Gardner Minshew 100 times out of 100. And I give Brock Purdy credit for what he's doing. I'm kind of amazed by what he's doing. I do, how much you talk to me enough. You know how much I respect Kyle Shanahan. That's part of it. I give him all the credit in the world. But I'm like a typical Philadelphia fan when it comes to Brock Purdy. And by that, I mean, I'm looking at the sky, Jody, because the shoe's coming. The other shoe's going to drop. I don't know when, but it's coming. It's coming. But, in the short sample size, I give him all the credit in the world. He's done a tremendous, tremendous job. I mean, that team right now, when we talk about ESPN Football Power Index, blah, 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 all that nonsense, right now, the best team in professional football is the San Francisco 49ers.
Right. And as per ESPN's Power Index, they're like 7th. Ridiculous. So that's why I'm putting all of ESPN's computer-generated analytics off to the side going, sorry, guys, I can't trust you. If you have San Francisco 7th, I know the top 4 are. Eagles actually moved up, believe it or not. They moved past Kansas City. They got more credit for playing.
I haven't looked. Now, where are they now? I don't.
They're 3rd. The Cowboys are 1st, as they were before, and you knew they were going to be after they beat the first. Eagles. The Bills are 2nd, the Eagles 3rd, Kansas City 4th, Cincinnati's 5th. So San Francisco at the highest.
That reminds me. I have to see where Pro Football Focus has the Eagles now. Still number 1. Still number 1. San Francisco number 2. Kansas City number 3. Dallas all the way down at number 7. That's Pro Football Focus.
Different strokes for different folks. So that's the beauty of subjectivity. You can see different things. I do like to use numbers. And numbers can be twisted and can be bent, but I do think numbers are important. And Brock Purdy's 3-0 in the 3 games that he started. In the last 3 games that Gardner Minshew started, the Eagles are 1-2. Just saying. That's my point.
Well, but come on, Jody. I mean, you're the one who says Week 18 doesn't matter in every other instance But now, because you want to prove a point, it matters. I mean, you got to throw that game out. Gardner Minshew was tremendous in the Jets game. Now, you can say just the Jets. We all know, everybody said it. The JB game, who gives a flip? That's the point. It's not black and white. That's the point. You got to look at each individual circumstance. And the Dallas game, he played better than I expected. I mean, I had the game 23-20. I think we both had the game 23-21. He played a hell of a lot better than I expected. I expected rust. And there was some rust. I hadn't played in the year. I expected some significant hiccups. I even might have expected a couple interceptions, but not the way they developed, where the receiver had a chance to help the quarterback. But yeah, I mean, come on, you got to throw that week. You can't throw it out the rest of the year and say it counts because you want to downgrade Gardner Minshew.
All right, and I would also throw out the Jet game, not to the same degree, because the Jets were just flat out bad defense last year. So he's 0-1. Yeah, this was a big game on the road against a very good team. Dallas is very good, so it was a difficult task that he came up short on, including when they got to within the red zone on the last possession. A debatable decision to spike the ball rather than use a timeout. And I know the coach came to his defense yesterday, and the coach was also defending himself because he could have chosen to use the timeout there rather than spike the football and give it up and down. He had 3 downs to get him into the end zone. He didn't do it. Yeah, you and I see the performance of Gardner Minshew much differently than
you are a tough grader. I give you that. Man, backup quarterback. He gets the team in position. Yeah, he didn't finish.
Right. But a backup quarterback who you and others said he's good enough to be a starter in the league. I just don't agree with that. I don't.
Yeah, but I'm talking like 27-32. I mean, I'm not talking about top 10, I'm talking he's a low-level starting quarterback in this league by meritocracy standpoint. Now, nobody's going to want to build their team around him. They're not going to want to sell him to the fan base. All of that stuff I agree with. But yeah, just from a meritocracy, he's 27-32. You think there's 32 better quarterbacks in the world than Gardner Minshew? I don't see it.
Yeah, I do. If we're talking 35, 27, somewhere in that 8, yeah, I do believe he's on the other side of it. And I absolutely believe, I said this to a caller the other day on WIP. If you'd like to make a wager on him being an opening day starter in the National Football League this year, I'll take as much as you want to put on the line. It has no chance of happening in the NFL next year. So to me, if he can't start for an NFL team on opening day, he's not a starting quarterback. Different ways to look at it. All right, Mac, guys, we will be joined by Chris Franklin. I see him ready to rock. He's going to jump aboard.